Fiancé left me for mom's lies. Now she's on her knees and begs me back. My fiancé dumped me months before our wedding because his mom said I wasn't good enough. You're nothing without my son. He can do so much better, she said. Sharp as a tack. I just chuckled and walked away. Now, she calls me 10 times a day, crying and begging me to take back her broken, sad son. It's still wild to me that I'm even writing this out. 3 months ago, I was planning what should have been the happiest day of my life with Connor, my partner of 3 years. Today, I'm crashing in my best friend's spare room, looking at apartment listings, and trying to figure out where everything went wrong. Connor and I met in 2021. Within 6 months, we were practically glued at the hip, and after a year and a half, we moved in together. When Connor first brought me home to meet his folks, his dad, Walt, seemed nice enough, a bit on the quiet side. Natalie, his mom, though, she spent the whole dinner grilling me about my background and family connections. She had this weird, tight smile that never reached her eyes. I remember telling her that my dad worked in construction and my mom was a school aide, and I saw Natalie's face drop a little before she quickly hid it. Connor just waved it off later, saying she was just protective and old-fashioned. He even said she came from a family that valued certain connections, but that he didn't care about that stuff. I believed him because, well, love makes you do dumb things sometimes. When Connor popped the question last year, I was beyond thrilled. He did it during a weekend getaway to this cute little bed and breakfast upstate. We decided on a medium-sized wedding, nothing over the top, since we were both saving up for a house down payment. The trouble began almost right after we announced our engagement. Natalie just had to be in on every single detail. At first, it seemed helpful. She knew a bunch of vendors and offered to help plan since I worked long hours. But it quickly became clear she was taking over. The place I loved for the wedding was too shabby. The food I wanted was not the kind of grub served at their family events. The wedding dress I fell for was a bit cheap looking, don't you think? Connor kept saying it was easier to just go with her ideas than fight her on everything. I grudgingly gave in on some things to keep the peace. But it felt like I was dying a little inside each time. Every choice that was snatched away from me chipped at my excitement until wedding planning felt more like a chore than a celebration. The real turning point happened during a dinner at their house a few months before the wedding. Natalie had invited her friends, Rita and Savannah, over. And I realized halfway through that I was basically being put on display for their approval. They kept shooting each other with these quick glances whenever I spoke. At one point, Rita asked where I summered as a child, and I actually laughed, thinking she was pulling my leg. When I explained that my family's idea of vacation was camping at the state park or visiting my grandma in Ohio, the whole table went silent. After dinner, Natalie cornered me in the kitchen while I was helping clean up. She started off with what seemed like normal talk about Connor's ex-girlfriend, Ellie, who apparently came from some big-shot family with a fancy vacation home in the Hamptons. Then she brought up how Connor was always meant for great things, and how she hoped I wouldn't hold him back. I felt like I'd just been slapped. When I asked her what she meant, she dropped the act completely. She told me that while I seemed nice enough, I clearly wasn't from the right sort of background to help Connor's future, that my lack of polish would eventually embarrass him in important circles, and that I wouldn't know how to entertain properly or make the right connections. I was so shocked I couldn't even say anything at first. When I finally found my voice and told her she was being incredibly rude, she just let out this snobby little laugh and said something about how my getting defensive just proved her point. She said Connor deserved someone who could match his potential, not drag him down. I stormed out of the kitchen and immediately told Connor we needed to leave. In the car, I was shaking as I told him everything his mother had said. I expected him to be furious, to stick up for me, something. Instead, he got quiet and said, she didn't mean it like that, and that she was just worried about our future. He even asked if maybe I had heard her tone wrong. That night was our first big fight. I couldn't believe he was defending her. He eventually admitted that his mother had been telling him her concerns about our compatibility for months. Apparently, she'd been filling his head with doubts about whether I would fit in with the future he imagined. The worst part was, he was actually listening to her. Over the next 2 weeks, things went downhill fast. Connor became distant and started staying late at work. When he was home, he'd bring up random worries about our relationship that had never been there before. Like whether our different backgrounds would cause problems with raising kids, or if I'd be comfortable at his company events. It all blew up when Natalie invited us over for another dinner, supposedly to clear the air. Connor practically begged me to go, saying she wanted to say sorry. Like a dummy, I believed him and went. There was no apology. Instead, Natalie spent the entire evening making nasty little comments about my clothes, my table manners, even the way I talk. When Connor went outside to take a phone call, she leaned across the table and said, with this creepy certainty, that I was nothing without her son, that he could do so much better than me, and that I should walk away before I ruined his life with my ordinariness. When I started crying, she actually rolled her eyes and said, my emotional behavior just proved her point about my lack of composure. When Connor came back, I was gathering my stuff to leave. When he asked what happened, Natalie put on this fake concerned face and said, I had overreacted to some gentle advice about wedding planning. I was done. For real. In the car, I told Connor exactly what happened and said he needed to make a choice. Either we cut ties with his mother until she could respect me, or the wedding was off. I expected him to finally stand up for me. He didn't. Instead, he said, maybe his mother was right. Maybe we were rushing into things. Maybe we did come from two different worlds to make it work. The man I loved, who had sworn he didn't care about status or background, was suddenly spouting his mother's snobby nonsense. I took off my engagement ring and put it on the dashboard. I told him to drop me at Savannah's place instead of our apartment. He didn't even try to stop me when I got out of the car. The next day, while Connor was at work, I packed most of my things from our apartment. I left my key and a note saying I would arrange to get the rest of my stuff later. I blocked his mother's number right away, though I kept Connor unblocked in case he came to his senses. He texted a few days later with a pathetic message about how he was confused and needed time to think. I replied that there was nothing to think about. Either he was willing to build a life with me based on love and respect, or he wasn't. His response? Maybe we should take a break until after his big work project is finished. Then reassess. That was my answer. 3 years together, and he couldn't even properly break up with me. He just wanted to keep me hanging on while he reassessed. I told him not to contact me again. According to our mutual friends, Connor has been telling people we both decided to call off the wedding due to different life goals. Meanwhile, I've thrown myself into putting my life back together. Yesterday, I got a voicemail from Natalie. I don't know how she got my new number, but she was sniffling and asking if we could talk about Connor. I didn't listen to the whole thing before deleting it. Whatever drama is going down in their perfect little world isn't my problem anymore. I know this was long, but I just needed to get it off my chest. The wedding would have been next weekend. Instead, I'm taking myself on a solo trip to a beach rental I found on a well-known accommodation sharing site. Not the honeymoon I imagined, but maybe exactly the fresh start I need. First of all, thanks a bunch for all the support on my last post. The first month after the breakup was honestly a blur. I stayed on Savannah's pull-out couch longer than I planned. She's seriously the best. Every morning, I'd wake up all messed up, reaching for Connor before remembering everything that had happened. My appetite just vanished, and I lost 10 pounds without even trying. Savannah started leaving protein bars on the coffee table because I'd just forget to eat. I spent a lot of time just staring at apartment listings, but I never actually called anyone. Something about making that move felt so final, like there was no going back. Savannah never pushed me, but after about 3 weeks, she gently brought up a place that had just opened up in her friend's building, suggesting we go check it out. The apartment was nothing special, just a small one-bedroom with a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it was within my budget and only a 15-minute drive from work. I signed the lease that same day. Moving in was another tough spot. I'd left most of my furniture behind at Connor's place because I couldn't deal with trying to arrange movers while feeling like a total emotional mess. Savannah and her boyfriend helped me grab the basics from a well-known flat-pack furniture store. A bed. A small couch. A dining table that also acts as my desk. The apartment stayed pretty empty for weeks. I just couldn't find the energy to make it feel like home. Work became my lifeline. I'd get there early, leave late, and volunteer for extra projects just to avoid sitting alone in my empty apartment. My team leader noticed and started giving me more stuff to do, like connecting with other departments, training the new person, that kind of thing. But it felt good to be needed, to be valued. About 2 months after the breakup, I bumped into Max, Connor's brother, at the grocery store. I almost ducked behind the cereal aisle when I saw him, but he spotted me first. I was surprised when he actually came over, looking really uncomfortable. He told me he was sorry about what happened and that he'd had a big argument with his mom about how she treated me. It was awkward, but it felt kind of good, in a weird way, to hear someone from Connor's family say that I'd been done wrong. That's when I first heard that things weren't going so hot for Connor. I thanked him for the apology but kept the chat short. I wasn't ready to be dragged back into that world. Not even a little bit. A week later, my old college roommate invited me to a party. I almost didn't go. But Savannah practically shoved me out the door, insisting that I needed to remember how to just hang out and be a normal person again. She was right. Though I'd never say it to her face. The party was where I met Matt. He was the roommate's cousin, just visiting from out of town. We just ended up in the same group, talking about all sorts of random stuff. He asked for my number at the end of the night, and I surprised myself by actually giving it to him. Our first date was coffee on a Sunday afternoon. Super chill. No pressure. He was easy to talk to, and for the first time in months, I went hours without even thinking about Connor. Matt works in something totally different from Connor's field. Lives in a modest apartment, kind of like mine, and has a refreshingly normal family that doesn't seem to care about fancy summer homes or making the right connections. When I told him about my breakup, the short version, he just listened without trying to fix anything or spout empty words. Around month 3 post-breakup, an unexpected chance popped up at work. My company was changing things around, making a new team, and they needed someone to take on more responsibility. My extra effort over the past months had apparently been noticed. My manager told me to apply, though she warned me the job would mean longer hours and more stress. I almost didn't go for it. My confidence was still pretty shaky, but I figured I had nothing to lose. The interview process was super tough. 3 rounds with different department heads. A presentation I stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting, and a final meeting with the big bosses. I honestly didn't think I'd get it. There were other people with more experience. But 2 weeks later, my manager called me into her office to offer me the position. The promotion came with a significant raise. That meant I could finally stop stressing about making rent each month. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to start rebuilding my emergency savings, which had been pretty much wiped out during the mess after the breakup. I was still trying to process this good news when I ran into Rita, Natalie's friend who loves to gossip, at the mall. I was shopping for new clothes for my new job, and she spotted me coming out of a store. She acted way too friendly, like we'd been super close before. After some awkward small talk, she dropped what felt like information she'd carefully planned to share. Connor had lost his job. Apparently. The big project he'd been working on, the one he'd used as an excuse when asking for a break from our relationship, had completely bombed. Something about missed deadlines and bad management. Rita seemed to be watching my face closely. So I kept my expression blank while she kept spilling the details. Connor had been let go, and according to Rita, he'd been having a hard time getting back on his feet ever since. She also mentioned, with thinly veiled delight, that Ellie had briefly gotten back together with Connor after our breakup, only to end it again after just a few weeks. Rita suggested that maybe I dodged a bullet and even gave me a wink. Later that week, I had another strange encounter. I was having dinner with Matt at this new restaurant downtown when I spotted Natalie across the room. She was with Walt and another couple I didn't recognize. Our eyes met for a second, and I quickly looked away, my heart suddenly pounding. I expected her to ignore me or maybe give me one of her famous cold stares. Instead, she actually walked over to our table while Walt looked on with a look of mild horror. She greeted me like we were old friends, saying how wonderful I looked. She asked about my new job, how did she even know about that? And complimented my outfit. Matt looked confused but was polite as I awkwardly introduced him. Natalie's smile tightened just a tiny bit when she realized I was on a date, but she kept up her friendly act. Before leaving, she mentioned that everyone misses me, and that she hoped we could catch up properly someday. I managed a vague reply, and she finally went back to her table. Matt took it in stride when I explained who she was, though he did say she seemed intense. The weirdness kept going. About a week later, Savannah forwarded me a social media message she'd gotten from Connor, asking how I was doing and if I was seeing anyone. She hadn't replied, knowing I wouldn't want her to share anything about my life with him. I was thankful for her loyalty but unsettled by his sudden interest. Through our mutual friends, I found out more about Connor's situation. After losing his job, he'd apparently moved back in with his parents while looking for work. The perfect life Natalie had imagined for him was falling apart. And from what I heard, she was not handling it well at all. I tried not to think about them too much. My relationship with Matt was moving forward naturally. No rush. Just a real connection. We'd been seeing each other for about 2 months, taking things slow. He came over to my apartment regularly, helping me slowly make the space feel more like home. We put up shelves for my books one weekend and hung some artwork the next, little touches that made the place feel less like a temporary stop. My new position at work was challenging but felt good. Some days I'd come home completely wiped out, questioning if I was up to the task. But overall, I was proud of myself for taking the leap. My team respected me, and I was finally starting to believe I deserved the opportunity. Then last Friday, everything changed again, just like that. I was heading out from work when my phone buzzed. It was a notification for a new voicemail, from a number I didn't know. I almost just swiped to delete it. I figured it was probably another one of those spam calls about my car's warranty. But something made me tap play. It was Natalie. Her voice sounded all thick and teary. She said she'd been trying to get hold of me, that she really needed to talk about Connor, that he wasn't doing well at all, that she'd messed up big time, and that she'd do anything to make things right between us. Just 6 months ago, this woman told me I was nothing without her son. Said I was a nobody. Now she was practically begging me for help. Like a lost puppy. I didn't call her back. I just went to Matt's place like we'd planned. But that voicemail just kept replaying in my head the whole night. Matt noticed I was a bit off, asked what was bothering me. When I spilled the beans, he didn't try to tell me what to do or offer quick fixes. He just asked what I wanted, what would actually bring me some peace. I woke up this morning to 3 more missed calls from Natalie. And there was a text from a number I didn't know, but I figured it was Connor's new phone. I still haven't opened that one. So, I guess the big question now is, do I even bother to get involved? Do I even engage with them? Last update. So, it's been about a month since my last update, and I need to let it all out because things have gotten strange. Like, super awkward and strange. Remember how I said Natalie left me a teary voicemail and I wasn't sure what to do? Well, after thinking it over for 3 days, I finally decided to text Connor's number, the one I didn't recognize, and just asked what was up. I figured a text was safer than calling, easier to ghost if things got weird. Literally 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Natalie, not Connor. Turns out, she'd been using his phone to get a hold of me since I'd blocked her number. I almost didn't pick up, but my curiosity got the best of me. Big mistake. That was. The Natalie on the phone was nothing like the icy, judgy woman I remembered. Her voice was shaky, almost like she was desperate. She started by asking how I was doing. Mentioned how good I looked when she saw me at the restaurant, which was still creepy, by the way. Then she just launched into what has to be the most awkward apology I've ever heard. She confessed she'd been awful to me, that she'd judged me wrongly based on shallow things, and that she was sorry she'd pushed me away. I just sat there, shocked. As she kept talking, she explained that Connor had been totally lost since we broke up, that he'd gone downhill fast after losing his job, that he was hitting the booze too much, and that he'd made some really dumb money choices. When I finally managed to ask why she was telling me all this, her answer made my skin crawl. She thought I could help. Like, help him get back on track. Because I was such a steadying hand. She actually said that. Connor needs someone responsible like you right now. The nerve of this woman. She went from telling me I wasn't good enough to decide I was exactly what her son needed when he was in a bind. I told her as calmly as I could that I felt bad Connor was having a rough time, but that we were over. Done. Finished. Months ago. I mentioned I was seeing someone new now. Her comeback? She just brushed it off, saying these rebound relationships usually don't last and that Connor and I had a real past together. Then she asked if we could grab coffee to talk more about everything. Against my better judgment, and despite Matt giving me a worried look when I told him about it, I said yes. I agreed to meet Natalie at a coffee shop next weekend. I told myself it would help me move on for good. Maybe I also wanted to see just how desperate things had gotten for her to come crawling back to the girl she once thought was beneath her son. When I got to the coffee shop, Natalie was already there. She looked pretty different from the prim and proper, stuck-up woman I remembered. Her usually perfect hair was tied back in a quick ponytail. She barely had any makeup on. And she just looked tired. She'd even ordered my favorite drink already. That was both a nice touch and a bit creepy, because it meant Connor must have told her what I liked. The next hour felt totally unreal. Natalie spilled all the beans about Connor's downfall, telling me every painful detail. After getting fired, he'd tried to keep living fancy while looking for a new gig. And he burned through his savings super fast. He'd also thrown money into some friend's startup that went nowhere, maxed out 2 credit cards, and now he was back in his old bedroom at their place, sleeping till noon and barely even trying to find a job. The whole time she was talking, I kept waiting for her to just flat out ask me to take Connor back. But she didn't. Instead, she was more sneaky. She kept saying stuff like, he was doing his best when he was with you, and you were always so good at getting him going, and he actually listens to you, unlike me. When I reminded her she once thought I wasn't good enough for her son, she actually got teary-eyed. She said she'd been shielding her son from the wrong stuff, and that she should have valued my stability more than Ellie's rich friends. I almost busted out laughing at how obvious she was being. Suddenly, I was steady instead of boring. And responsible instead of not having any drive. I left that meeting feeling weird. Empty inside. I thought I'd feel good seeing Natalie brought down a peg. But mostly I felt sorry for her, mixed with some leftover anger. I told her I'd think about talking to Connor, but I didn't promise anything. That should have been the end of the story. But it wasn't. The calls started the very next day. Non-stop. Natalie called to check in after our coffee chat. Then she called again to say Connor had asked about me. Then she called to bring up a job opening she thought Connor might be right for, asking if my company was hiring. Every single day. Like clockwork. I started letting her calls go straight to voicemail. The messages just got more and more desperate. She mentioned that Connor's dad was threatening to cut off his money if he didn't pull himself together soon. She talked about how their fancy friends were asking awkward questions about Connor's situation. She even brought up my parents once, saying she'd love to make things right with them too. Max, Connor's brother, texted me one evening to say sorry for his mom's antics. He explained that Connor's downward slide had been worse than what the family had been letting on. Apparently, Connor had started drinking a lot after we broke up, and that played a part in him doing badly at work. Max said Natalie was partly blaming herself for pushing me away, seeing it as the beginning of Connor's troubles. But he was quick to add that Connor was the one responsible for his own choices, and that I shouldn't feel pressured or guilty into getting mixed up in it. I really appreciated Max being honest and the fact that someone in that family actually understood I wasn't supposed to fix Connor. Meanwhile, things with Matt were getting more serious. He'd been super understanding about the whole mess, never pushing me to do anything. We'd even started talking about maybe moving in together when his lease was up in a few months. The difference between his calm support and the total chaos of Connor's family was not lost on me, not one bit. Roughly 2 weeks after that coffee chat, Natalie really upped her game. She showed up right at my workplace. I was walking to my car after work, and there she was, waiting in the parking lot. My heart sank. This was a huge no-no. She'd seriously crossed a line. She came at me with this crazy, desperate look, clutching a folder that looked like Connor's resume. She asked if I could put in a good word for him at my company. Can you believe it? I was fuming. I told her straight up that she was out of line and needed to quit bothering me. Her face crumpled, and she started crying right there in the parking lot. She said she didn't know what else to do, that Connor wasn't listening, that she was desperate to help her boy. A few of my colleagues saw the whole awkward scene, and it was super embarrassing. I ended up leading Natalie to a bench away from the main door. I told her as calmly as I could that I couldn't help her, or Connor, that our relationship was done, and that she needed to back off and respect my space. She finally left. For the rest of the week, people at work kept giving me curious glances, the ones who saw the parking lot drama. Savannah, who's also at my company, had to answer questions from folks wanting to know who the crying woman was. What a mess. It was embarrassing and made me so mad. Then Connor himself finally got in touch. He sent a long text, saying sorry for his mom's behavior and for how things wrapped up between us. He admitted he'd made a massive blunder listening to his mother instead of sticking up for us. He said he missed me every single day and was too embarrassed to reach out directly after all that went down. Reading his message, I felt nada. Nothing. No little spark of old feeling. No joy from his regret. Just tired. And a feeling like things were finally closing. I showed the message to Matt. He read it. Didn't say a word. I decided not to text Connor back right away. I needed some time to think about what, if anything, I wanted to say. But Natalie didn't give me that peace. She called again the next morning, asking if I'd gotten Connor's message and what I thought about it. When I told her I thought it was out of line for her to butt into our conversation, she got all defensive. Said she was just trying to help. That's when something inside me just snapped. I told Natalie, in a voice so calm it even surprised me, that I was blocking her number right after this call. I said if she ever bothered me at work again, I'd report it as harassment. And that Connor was a grown-up who needed to sort out his own issues instead of sending his mom to clean up his mess. Before I hung up, I added one last thing. Maybe if she'd raised her son to care about who people are, not how fancy their last name is, he wouldn't be in this bind right now. That evening, I finally texted Connor back. I told him I forgave him for how things ended, because holding on to anger wasn't doing either of us any good. But I also made it super clear that we had no future, that I'd moved on, and he needed to do the same. I suggested he get some real help for his drinking and gambling, and that he needed to stop letting his mom fight all his battles. I ended by wishing him well and telling him not to contact me ever again. I blocked both their numbers right after hitting send on that message. It felt like finally slamming shut a door that had been left open for way too long. The very next day, though, I got a direct message on social media from Natalie. She'd made a brand new account just to message me. Seriously. This time, her tone was mad. Big mad. She called me heartless. Said I was ditching Connor when he needed me most. She said I was tossing away years of history just because I was too proud. That last bit almost made me crack up. Natalie talking about pride. Like she hadn't totally ruined our relationship with her own ego. I didn't reply. Just blocked that account too. But she found other ways. Emails from new addresses. Even a handwritten letter sent to my apartment. Each time she tried to reach me, it was more desperate than the last. The last straw came last weekend. For real. Matt and I were having dinner at my place when someone knocked on the door. I opened it. And there was Connor. Standing right there. He looked a mess. And it was clear he'd had a few drinks. Natalie was lurking anxiously behind him. Like a shadow. I was so shocked I couldn't say a word at first. Matt came up behind me. Asking who was at the door. The look on Connor's face when he saw I had someone else there? Almost pathetic. What happened next was just awkward and uncomfortable. Connor tried to talk about our history. About how much he regretted his choices. Natalie kept jumping in. Saying how good we were together. So annoying. I didn't let them inside. Instead, I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door partly shut behind me. I told Connor as gently but firmly as I could that this wasn't okay. That showing up at my place without warning was a serious boundary violation. I told him I meant what I said in my message about moving on. Connor's reaction surprised me. He turned to his mom and said this was exactly why he didn't want to come. That he told her this would just make everything worse. Then he said sorry to me again. Not for the breakup this time, but for not protecting me from his mom back then. And even now. I haven't heard a peep from either of them in the 5 days since that whole scene. Max texted me once to say sorry again and let me know he was taking Connor to his first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. Good for him. I thanked him. But I didn't ask for any more updates. Matt and I are going on a weekend trip soon. I've changed my email and asked my manager to keep an eye out for any unwanted visitors. Life just keeps going. And honestly, it's way better than I ever thought it would be a year ago, when I was planning a wedding to the wrong guy. I don't know if I'll even need to post another update. Lesson. This is such a powerful lesson in self-esteem and the importance of protecting your self-worth. Someone tries to control or manipulate your relationships based on their own insecurities and expectations. But true happiness comes when we accept ourselves for who we are and let go of negative influences. This is a reminder that love should be unconditional, not dictated by status or external judgments to be the best. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about how this situation played out? If it had been the case, would you have handled things differently? Share your thoughts below.